would you say it's accurate that sometimes you are doing the role, the next role, while you're still in that?
Correct.
You're working toward it, and so then they see, the opportunity for you to move
And
up.
it's often more than the X's and O's of what you do. It's how do you handle adversity? How do you handle a problem? How do you relate to other people? What suggestions have you brought to the table to make people think about something a little bit differently? It isn't just, yes, I know how to fill out this Excel spreadsheet perfectly. That's not the point of improving your lot or taking on more responsibility. It isn't that you were the best widget maker. It was, I understand how to make widgets, but I'm also looking at other things around and I'm learning from those experiences, because that's what the next job is going to be.
Janet, what would you like to add from your experience?
Well, I think it's really true. And some of it is watching for the opportunities. So I would be in a room and, hearing that there's a gap. And I'm like, I could do that. And I would take on stuff that wasn't in my role, but then demonstrating that I had a skill set that was broader. And then I really believe in the operations. If you're going to join whatever, a university, a government agency, a business, learn deeply how the business works. So being in operations is key, being in sales, being in the front line somewhere. So one of the things I was, this analyst at corporate, I'm like, I want to go run a call center because that was like the front line. And they're like, you're crazy. You're going to kill your career. You need to stay here. And I'm like, but I want to know, I want to talk to customers. I want to understand what that is. And I did that move. And I was told that was a bad career move. But I did it anyway because I didn't believe that. I believed I needed to deeply understand what it was to talk to a customer, to have a sales quota, to collect, have quotas on me and apply analytics to that job, but also people skills. I dealt with a union, it was all those experiences. And only because I took that job did I get the call from regulatory, because they needed someone with analytic background who had customer service skills who could talk to the Illinois Commerce Commissioners, right? If I hadn't taken that job, that next job wouldn't come, because I was building a portfolio of skills rather than worrying about what my next job was at that time. And I think it's really important earlier in your career, you think about that. You think about understanding the business and broadening your experience set, because that's how I can, to be a CEO, you need to know pretty much every function, how a business works. Be a CFO and a CIO, I have two, kind of professional skill sets. I wouldn't have gotten them if I hadn't taken some risks and moved around earlier in my career to different roles to build that. So.
And I like that you said that too, because how can you lead if you've never experienced that side of it, right? So that's just, it gives you credibility for those who you're leading, because they're like, she did that and she knows, she understands us. And then you saw the client side as well. So I really like that.
That's a very good
Yeah,
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. How do you balance CIO and CFO? Like, that seems overwhelming, Janet.
So I actually, there's a lot of commonality to Cindy, how you think about both of those roles. So if you think about both of those roles as having a deep ability to drive change in a company, a deep ability to solve problems, and a lot of analytic and discipline to drive them forward, there's a lot of commonality in the skill set to lead those two organizations. And there's a lot of what I call synergies between those two organizations. If you know where all the money ends up, and you know everything that processes through the systems, you kind of got the lay of the land. And a lot of where IT leaders fail is not understanding how the company makes money. I mean, I've been invited to speak on that, right? And I read articles like how a CIO can get to learn and work better with the CFO. And I'm like, I got this, I got this, So it's really the CFO provides the opportunity to deeply understand how the business runs, and then you can leverage that to make the systems be very practical for solving business problems, not just building cool technical stuff, right? So and when I look at my day and balance it, I actually color code it. So I do color code it to kind of look at the week, how much is finance, how much is C, how much is not either of those, because we're in a lot of conversations that are an operational conversation or a commercial conversation, whatever. So I sort of try to make sure I'm taking care of both people sets, but they fuse because they're both solving the same business problem.
I will tell you, to add to that, Janet came on as CFO. not CIO at the same time. And we would be in meetings, and the technology department, the information department would come in and talk about something really cool that they wanted to spend some money on. And to a layperson, it sounded, well, that sounds like that would make sense. Janet would always be one who would come in and say, that's great, but what's the, why would I have to buy a Jaguar or a Maserati in this when 3/4 of its functionality doesn't fit what we're doing? Is there an option to spend something that only gives us, this quarter of what we're doing and how it would enhance, but then we could take that money and invest it somewhere else? And it would make the IT folks or the former CIO just sit back and think, but that's not the coolest, but that just isn't, and it was that practicality of, we're buying more than we need. And we could use that money somewhere else for definitive things that we absolutely need. So it didn't take very long for me to realize that she needed to be the CIO too. So, it worked that way.
And with her people skills, she can work with the IT person.
She wears a lot of different hats in a day, and is well conversant in just about any hat that she has on. It's a Janet Zelenka skill, something I'm sure she honed as she was hiding pumpkins or decorating pumpkins somewhere here on this campus a few years ago. But I think all of those skills and ability happen, and folks don't realize it right now, but when you're on a campus like this and you're engaged in the world of academia, you're engaged in something broader than that. How do you problem solve? How do you work with people? What behaviors are you seeing that annoy you more than anything that you never want to repeat? It's all of that, and I think Janet is certainly quite a great example, I think, for Rockford University and for anybody who's trying to make their way. And that has nothing to do with gender. It has nothing to do with it really is. It's just something that's really good for business and success and life in general.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really good. So there were some questions that were submitted ahead of the Zoom that we're gonna kind of throw at you. So, and then if we have extra time, if you want to submit questions on the chat afterwards, if we have some time after these questions are answered, feel free to do so. So first question is how to succeed and persist despite challenges. Kind of a general question. What would you?
Yeah, I think I look at, to me, work is a microcosm of life, and there's a challenge every day. And for anybody to wake up to believe that today should be challenge-free, I think just doesn't have a grasp of life. Nothing goes perfectly as planned. And if it doesn't go perfectly planned in your personal life, work is going to be the exact same thing. So I think never letting a pothole or a bump in the road really knock you off your game. I think having a great perspective over you're not really as great as the success you had yesterday, and you're not really as bad as the failure you might have today. We sometimes in the moment build headlines far bigger and we blow things out of proportion as to where they are. It takes us away from our ability to learn how to repeat the success when you fill yourself with too much hubris, and the lamenting over something that didn't work well takes you away from your recovery and from your ability to improve. So I think putting things into perspective helps with the persistence for tomorrow. And I think just the understanding that there's always challenges, and how you react how you show your team, how you show your family, your ability to handle the fact that the waters are choppy. Someone always told me, I said, you know what, anybody can steer a boat when the water's calm. Anybody on the planet. People put their 2-year-old grandchildren on their laps when the water's really smooth and let them just hold on to pretend they're driving. That's how easy that part of life is. What I think universities need to teach, and what part of the experience is to understand that you are out on the water, and at any given point in time, it's a little bumpy or it's, swells of water. Your ability, you're learning, how do I navigate that? And if just constantly saying, I only want it to be smooth, you eliminate yourself from everything that goes on in a day, in your life, and your inability to handle all of that. So to me, I think, it's just understanding that nothing's as bad as you think it is, and nothing's really as great as you think it is. The goal is just to stay steady and continue to improve for tomorrow. At least that's how I look at it.
That's great.
So definitely expect challenges, right? Every day.
Every day.
Expect them and be ready for them.
And you can make a career if you go like a moth to a flame to the challenges, because other
Correct.
people will shy away from them. And if you go, I think I can handle that challenge and overcome it, then you'll be given the next challenge, and that's another way that you
Exactly.
move up in an organization, that you know how to handle them. So I actually look for the challenges in the situation. Also, I think there's a leadership component of self-reflection. So if you had a bad day, right, you define a bad day, I spend at the end of every day just reflecting, what kind of leader was I today, right? And what did if I had a bad day, and I really do, it's really fun, we have fun, but did I contribute to that? What did I do as a leader that could have been differently to contribute to making it a better day, before I go worry about what someone else did, to me or something. It's all about what did I project? What did I do? How could I handle something different? And then you can't change that day. You go, but I can bring that into the next day. And so a set of optimism that every day is a day to learn how to be better at doing life, right? And the other thing is, some people get really caught up in risk in their job. Like, oh, I'm afraid to take this risk. Like, I'm afraid to make this decision. I'm afraid to do this. Well, if it's a $30 million decision, yeah, you should probably ask somebody. But if you're gonna decide, I'm gonna talk to this person, or I'm gonna try something a little different. I asked a lot of people, what do you think bad is going to happen? And people will put a whole bunch of imaginings of awful things, like, so, okay, let's put that, so someone's gonna yell at you. Okay, how often have you been yelled at work? Well, never. Okay, so why do you project yourself into that someone's gonna be mad at you? Well, I don't know, I just feel that they'll be mad at me. And you start to unpack the fears that create in the workplace. So and the worst that could happen, which is highly unlikely to connect this decision to you being fired, is ridiculously low, right? And if that's the worst that can happen, there are a lot of other companies out there, right? So when you start to dimensionalize risk-taking in business, actually most of the risks are very small, and you're demonstrating decision-making and problem-solving when you're tackling them. I hope that makes sense. So.
Yes, and perfect segue to talk about the challenge that came up for everyone with COVID that we didn't expect, right? And how you both handled it in your companies.
Yeah, I think to me, the understanding of, okay, the world is different very quickly. My first panic was, how am I going to keep us together? How am I going to maintain, a modicum of control and connection and collaboration? And we very quickly, adjusted to the Zoom world, and then went to executive leadership team and the top, 30 or 40 people in the company every day on a call to talk about. So it would be lawyers, operators, HR folk, finance, IT, compliance and ethics folks, our commercial representatives on a team every day. And I remember starting, and I know the order. I go down through engineering, North American operations, international operations, finance and accounting and IT, HR, commercial, Office of Ethics and Compliance, and general counsel. every day, like clockwork. We would be on at noon East Coast time, 11 o'clock here. And originally we were on twice a day,
Mhm.
but then, and we would say, all right, engineering, what are you seeing? What's happening? Where are we in facilities? What's going on? And then North America, what's going on in operations? How, what's going on with people? We just went down, and everybody started to learn more and more about what everybody else was working on. And it drove a far more collaborative, hey, I was working on this, but I think this might also help finance and accounting. So Janet, I need to work with someone on your team so that we can, this would benefit, I think, both of us. And we learned far more about the business. We made some tough decisions quicker, with more buy-in, simply because we immediately became, I think, even more connected than we had been up to that point in time.
Yeah, and just to everybody, if you're not familiar with Stericycle's business model, we pick up regulated medical waste. So all of a sudden, we're in the heat of the battle of fighting COVID with, it wasn't like, oh, the whole 15,000 people go home. It was like 2,000 people are working remotely, and the rest are still in the hospitals with the masks, picking up infectious waste, advising hospitals how to handle it. So we had that side of the battle.
Yep.
And that was fast moving. They need a pop-up site here. They need this there. If you looked at the first vaccine, the container next to it was a Stericycle container that they put the
The very
needle.
first shot, we were in the background, you have to really zoom your camera in, but that was a Stericycle
container, like
Stericycle
a,
Sharps container right
everybody's looking
there.
at the shot. We're going, look at the container. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's like, wow, did you get a vaccination? Who cares? Look at the Stericycle container.
So we're doing that, and then we also own Shred It, which, if you think about what that is picking up paper from businesses that and then shredding it for secure destruction, which is an important business for banks and hospitals and most corporations in America. And a lot of those companies just shut their doors and everybody went home. So now you're dealing with that company as well. And we learned a lot about that. It's an amazing, resilient business model, but we had two different business models, and we also were watching the pandemic internationally. So we were in, Romania and UK and England and France, and we started to realize that our operations there could give us early warning signals of what was going to happen in the US as well. So that international communication really helped us manage through it.
It was very interesting, but again, it's a challenge. It's a challenge that's on, meteoric scale.
Right.
But still, it is something that you rely upon your experiences and the things that you think are going to work. And a lot of that boils down to communication and collaboration. You rely on those things, and then before you know it, you're on the other side of it. I like to say 3 things happened to companies during that time. They either didn't make it, they would either be changed forever, or they would figure out new ways of doing things and succeed. And I said that from the very beginning, and I think, I'd like to think we learned an awful lot and have come through that much better for it. But everybody was faced with that. Everybody had options, and some companies weren't able to weather it.
Right, so you definitely rose to the challenge, right? And then you also showed up. That's part of the title of this.
Yeah.
That's how
Showed
you
up. I like it. I
showed
like it.
up.
It's a good segment.
Yes, yes. So thank you. Now I wanted to transition to maybe give an example of how you were able to be yourself at work, that authenticity that we're talking about. At any point in your career, like where did you feel like you were going to work and you brought your whole self and you felt comfortable to do that?
I think authenticity. I learned an awful lot from watching leaders say one thing and then scream at you at work, all kinds of things, and then like 10 minutes later you'd see them speaking to the local Rotary Club about how to be nice at work, and you think, wow, that couldn't be any further. There is not one lick of authenticity in any of that. And I think for me, I learned enough examples of what not being authentic look like? That, and it's not to say that people don't make mistakes or any of those other things, but then the authenticity is the ability to admit it, to admit the mistake, admit the bad behavior, try to make amends, try to fix some things. So I think, but then I will also tell you one thing. Some folks take authenticity to mean that I don't need to try to fit in with anything. And I think if you're on a team called your family, or you're on a team called, my dorm floor, or you're on a team, sporting team, or you're on a team at work, there are certain things that maybe you can still be authentic to who you want to be, but you realize that, this is, I'm going to compromise somewhere in here so that I can continue to enhance and be a contributor to this group, as opposed to, it is my way or the highway. And I see all things one way of anything is never any good. And, taking authenticity to the point where, I am not going to compromise, I'm not going to do any of these other kinds of things, lends to creating dysfunction within a group too. And I think understanding the balance, that it isn't always just your way. It isn't just always you remaining, this is the only way that it can be. I think the flexibility, there has to be flexibility within it as well. But certainly doing one thing, saying one thing and doing the other, whether you're a parent, children see it in their parents, you see it with your boss, you see it, that just doesn't build credibility.
Right. So balance is key, relationships are number one. Your coworker says the same thing, that they want to bring their whole self and their opposite personality.
Yep.
Then you're both kind of,
And you get nowhere.
Right.
You
You're
get
not
nowhere.
accomplishing anything. So good point. Janet,
No,
what
I-
example do you have?
So I think authenticity is about a bit about sharing of yourself. You have to be a little vulnerable if you want to say, who is this person really versus a facade, which is what you were referring to. Someone was a facade to one place. So be very thoughtful of don't building facades that are unnecessary because you think somebody needs to see you in a certain way. This is who I am. This is what I bring. I'm going to be professional. I mean, there's certain, you don't carry it to the point of, there's decorum and professional standards, et cetera. But this is who I am. So don't say you care about people and don't care about people. You have to demonstrate it every day to be authentic. You can't just say, well, I start my staff meetings, talk about my people, therefore I care about my people, and then you're mean to them the rest of the day. You gotta be, if you're gonna be a caring leader and that's your brand, then you gotta demonstrate, being a caring leader, whatever is you. And, there's really not a different Janet that walks in the door at home. And I doubt for Cindy then walks into the Stericycle door. And I think people figure that out pretty quickly.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah, you can tell if they're genuine or not right away.
and don't be afraid. Now, there are dumb questions. Some say they're never dumb question. If you haven't been listening on the Zoom call for 45 minutes and you think you need to say something and you ask a question that was already explained for 40 minutes, that's a dumb question. Okay, so you got to be there now and you got to be present. But if you're engaged in a meeting and you truly don't understand what's going on, you should. I asked one yesterday. And it was a technology question.
Questions all the time.
It's like, I don't know what you're saying here. Does this connect to here and this connect to that? And I know if I'm asking the question, there's 20 other people in the room that don't know the answer either. So you're serving a purpose for more than just you.
I'm constant. Okay, time out.
Yeah.
Okay, time out. I don't understand what does that mean? So let me explain what I think you're saying, and then you tell me where I'm wrong. And I do it regularly. Yeah, I just think it's important.
And you're not authentic if you pretend to know something you don't. So that's how I'm
true,
tying it back to being authentic. Because you're gonna get caught. You're gonna get caught. I have a couple of CFOs and I watched a lot. Like you watch a lot. I watched the CFOs and they pretended they knew something they didn't. I'm like, oh, this is gonna break bad, and it did, right? Because that just you can't. You need to say I don't know, and I'll get back to you, right? So
That's great. Thank you for that. How about navigating gender norms as female executives?
I would like to say that I always put things in this perspective. So I've got, life was different and things were different in the, certainly, well, even before my time, and then into my time in the 80s and the 90s. It was different. We're now in the 2020s. What's different for me is I don't know anymore if there are, I don't know if, I think we pigeonhole people less and less, and I'll give you an example. My son is 35. His whole life, 35 years of life, he's seen me work. It's not unusual it's not like she shouldn't be there. It's not my father. If my father were alive, he'd be 84. My father saw a school teacher or the librarian or a nurse or the church organist as a female role. And then outside of that, that was unusual for my dad. Now, God rest his soul, he told me I could be anything, and he even when it wasn't popular, or the thing to do, he was that guy. And I'm thankful for it every day. But for my son, for in the 30s, or your 20s, or even a little older than that, they're used to their moms, their aunts, their sisters. So I don't think we fall into, and I know it's great to be able, everybody wants to have a war story, because then you can claim that you too are attached to this issue. And for someone, even like me, to even think about wanting to compare myself to what Jane Addams would have gone through in terms of trying to get somebody to vote. I'm not even I'm not even in the same solar system with issues that she may have faced. But there is this need in society to perpetuate an old norm or an old way of how it was, so that you can feel like you're as aggrieved, or you're as attacked, or you're as, I would tell you, I listen to my son, I think both of his bosses are women. It isn't like he comes home and there's any discussion, or I ever see him and there's any discussion about female norms. We made a dumb decision on A, B, or C. And there's never, because it was a woman, like that isn't how the sentence ends. It's, this corporation, made a ding dong move over doing A, B, or C, and he'll complain about those things. Or I don't like this guy because he doesn't do A, B, or C, or I don't like this gal but it's not because she shouldn't be doing that because she's a woman. I never hear any of those things anymore. And I think I'm really looking forward to when we progress to a point, because at this point in time, if my son was doing those things, guess whose responsibility that was? Mine. I did it. I would have created that monster. Now, he may be a monster on other things, and I also have a daughter, and she might be a monster on other things. But I will tell you that I'm looking forward to the point where we progress past that, where no one else can hearken to those days, because we now all have a responsibility who's talking about those things to have raised a son or a daughter to know better. And I think maybe a whole industry will go away, and that might be a bad thing, but for some of those folks. But for me, I don't know that anybody. I'm sure people don't like me for a lot of reasons. I gave them bad feedback, or I did something else, and I'm sure people like me for. I'm hoping that it's not because I did something as a woman. I'm just hopeful. I'm hopeful they say, she seemed competent. She handled this very well. She was a caring leader. I've had many men that I worked for that I thought were very caring, that I thought did really wonderful things that I tried to emulate. So I'm hopeful we're moving towards that, and we can get away from, she did something like a girl.
Yeah, and you mentioned something I think is important. In the workplace, I think, we there's been so much focus on diversity inclusion. I'm sure there's still micro inequities and things like that we all need to call out, but really it's in the family situation. We have to raise our children to break through the norms early on. I mean, I remember sitting waiting for my son to come out in that moment when I wasn't a career, and I was picking him up, had a career, and I was picking him up at the kindergarten door, and a mother said to her daughter, "Don't worry about failing the math test. Girls aren't good at math," right? That was, I was debating, like, do I go over there or not? It's like, I probably shouldn't start an altercation, but, those messages very early on from both the fathers and the mothers and the uncles and the aunts reinforcing that actually is the most empowering thing. You said your dad was supportive. My dad never even mentioned to me that there was an issue with being a woman in the workplace. I didn't know that, so I think that was really, an important part of my upbringing. It sounds like yours too.
And I think very similarly, I think they've done some studies. I know they have, where they've talked about, my dad would always say, did you work hard? Yes. Did you work as hard as you possibly could? Yes. Then it was great. Whether it was in sports or it was on my grades or whatever, do you think you worked hard? And they've done a study of kids where they tell them in second grade, they took a group, and if they did well, they said, "Oh, you're really smart. My gosh, you're smart. You are so smart. You did great. You're so smart." That by the time they gave them a test that they never ever learned any of the material on, the kids, the ones that were smart, didn't want to take the test for fear that all this new material, if they answered, they wouldn't be called smart. So they decided not to try. And yet they took another class where they told everybody, my gosh, if they did well, you worked so hard that was just great, how much effort you put into that. And you worked so hard, and you should be proud of how hard you worked, that they gave that group the exact same test with not, like, it could have been in French, but they gave them the test, and every single one of those kids tried. And it wasn't about, I fear not being called smart. I want to be rewarded because I know I'm trying. And I think that goes to Janet's point on the differences between what we, how we, say things. I say to my grandson right now, just played in the baseball tournament last week. He did very well. But when he came off, his little hug from me is, I am so proud of how hard you worked while you were out there. I saw you do this, that, or the other thing, when you were doing it. Now, he did great stuff, but I didn't tell him he was great, and I won't. I am so proud of the effort and how hard you worked, because I think at the end of the day, whether it's in personal life situations, it's in dealing with family, nothing is smooth, and everything that's worthwhile requires effort. And sometimes we get pigeonholed where we just don't even want to put in the effort.
Yeah, so definitely something that we all can teach our children, right? I have 3 boys, so I can relate.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yep. It's great.
Every day they know we're gonna go work hard, so
Yep.
work hard at what you're gonna do. So.
Yep.
Next question, how do you self-motivate on those days when it's hard to find your motivation?
Gosh, I'm rarely unmotivated, and so that's a tough one. But I would say that there's days you wake up and you're tired, or you're like, oh my gosh. I think about the mantra of I have an amazing life. Who the heck are you to be sad about going to work on such an incredible opportunity that you've been given in life? And people are counting on you. People are counting on you to walk in that door and be the best you can be. So it's a little pep talk if you have those days. And I think that people counting on us, people are counting on us to help lead a company. We don't run the whole thing. We're not delivering this. We're picking up the waste, right? But they're counting on us to be the best we can be, so they can feed their families, so they can raise their children, so they can save for college. So, if I have a 401k meeting, it's not about, I got to pick out the, stock for the, it's like people are investing their life savings in here. We really need to be thoughtful about what we're doing here. So bringing it back to the people that are counting on you to walk in that door kind of is what motivates me every day.
And I think for me, I'll give you a specific example. In 30 years or 30 plus years of life or business, not every job was my favorite. Not every person I worked with was my favorite, nor my friend, Not every boss I had was there were a lot of ones that if I could invite 1,000 people to a picnic, they would be beyond that number of human beings that I know. So I think there's this fallacy that everything has to be just perfect, and it doesn't. I'll give you an example. For my career, they moved me, I was going to take over a facility in Brooklyn, New York with UPS. Brooklyn, New York, and it was in the lousiest spot in Brooklyn. We were right across from the Brooklyn dump. It stunk, just everything else was bad. It was crime ridden when I would drive in. And my family we couldn't afford to live very close to the facility. So I lived an hour and a half away on the New Jersey side, exit 8A, for anybody who knows the Jersey side. I used to have to cross the Outer Crossings Bridge, Staten Island, the Verrazano Bridge, drive up past Coney Island to get in. And I would have to, if I had to be in the operation as an operator, if I had to be there for 6 or 6:30 in the morning, I was up at 4. I was in the car by 4:30. I was driving to the facility and then fighting that many New York traffic folks on Friday to get across the Verrazano Bridge, especially on a Friday in the summer with everybody going to the beach. It could be a 3 or 4 hour ride home. And I remember my family saying, tell me again why we did this. I'm like, remind me why we took this assignment. And at the moment, I couldn't give them a reason why. I was struggling to find the reason why. And it was just the day of the flip phone, the Crazer, I think, was out. For anybody who's seen the flip phone, I would call my grandmother every day. She was the only person I knew would be awake at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I would call my grandmother, I'd lay the phone on my lap, and I would drive in and I would talk to her. And then on my way home, I would call her. So I talked to my grandmother twice in a day. And it's just because I wanted to hear her mind-numbing. I would say, Graham, just talk. I don't care what you say. And she would talk, we would talk. If I was frustrated, I would talk to her. But I will tell you, it was very, very difficult for me. And I kept thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know how long I can continue to do this. Because once Saturday came, I slept for at least half the day. And then, would recover. And then before you know it, I'm going back to work. I hated Sunday nights. It was very difficult. And I remember the motivation there. My grandmother, I had to find some source of help. It happened to be that flip phone on my lap with just hear my grandmother's voice. Okay, thank goodness. And I could get through it. And her whole advice to me was, Cindy, there are alternatives, but you can't do anything until you know you have another job. Your family is counting on you. And then I think about the responsibility that I had, and it took away, a little bit of my own pain. But I think that was a very important step in my life and in my career. It separated me from most. And my next step was a big leap. And then after that, they were just big opportunities. But that was the one that could have broke me. It broke many. It broke many, but it wasn't going to break me. And I look back at it now and I don't even remember it. I can remember the phone. I don't remember how painful it was. I imagine that it was, but it was a moment in time in the big scope of life. And I think we constantly have to look at motivation and understanding, where is this in terms of the whole, and don't get swallowed up by the problem of that moment. And that it's a great lesson you learn, and you look back at it, 25 years ago or 20 years ago. When you're in it in the moment, you think it's a tsunami, but and this too shall pass.
Right. So both of you had examples of that responsibility and relationships were what kept you motivated, right?
Yeah.
So
That's a good way to,
really
Good way to put it.
Yep.
So, and then kind of piggybacking on that, just how to build that sustainable success. So those were moments, but if you take your whole career, there's all these moments. How do you keep it going?
Well, I actually didn't keep it going. I actually left the workforce. So that was an issue. So I kept a sense of who I was going through it all.
Mhm.
But jobs were, and careers were, was something I had to reflect on. And the reason is because Ameritech got acquired. I had a great opportunity to leave. I had a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old at home. I was traveling all the time. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna pass this IQ test, because if you stayed longer, you didn't get any of the money, and if you left, you got the money, and I figured that out pretty fast. So, so it gave me a great time to reflect on why I liked work. You know, and because you don't have the stripes, no one's calling you, you know, that you're the CFO or whatever. I was CFO of the IT subsidiary, and, you know, you were an executive, and, you know, when you're in the grocery store changing a diaper, no one, you know, knows what you are. So, I realized what I love about working, and that has sustained me for the second career that I have, which is I love to solve problems, and the harder the problem, the better. I love to work with people. I love to engage with people and, in a collaborative way to solve them. I like to work for a company that I think is adding good to society, or, you know, contributing and helping other people do that for their families. And that was it. And it really didn't matter what job it was, as long as I could help a company do that. That really was my true north. And I think I was inherently my true north through my first part of my career, but it really became very conscious of part. So when Cindy was asking me, you know, to join Stericycle, those were the questions I was answering. You know, are there interesting and difficult problems to solve? Oh yeah. You know, are these people that I can enjoy being with, are they authentic, right? You know, those kind of questions. And is this company doing something that I believe in? And the answers were yes. So the problems that we were solving were minimal to that. This was going to provide me with that kind of opportunity.
So purpose and fulfillment and working with good humans, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't mean it's not hard, or there's not tough decisions, or I'm working lots of hours, or I'm doing a long commute, or we're schlepping around New York, right? You know, trying to get money for the company or something. It doesn't mean it's easy. You never heard the word easy in any of what I said. But that's what will sustain you in the tough times too.
Great. She said it best.
Okay, we'll leave it at that, so.
That's a good one.
And then on the subject of leadership, methods, tips, and skills that you use with authenticity and mindfulness.
I think for me, the key to me, I am never, ever the smartest person in the room. That is, I mean, every time I'm in the room with Janet, I'm just not, but I'm really, really good with it. What I like to do is, my key to success has always been, you'll find there's two different leaders. There's going to be a leader who needs to be the smartest, the biggest, the boldest, and that isn't just men. I've been around plenty of women. People think that this women's sorority, that all women want to make sure that every other woman does well. I have some experiences, and I would beg to differ. The human experience is sometimes a personality trait in a man or woman says it needs to be me at all costs. And there's no special link on being a wonderful person just because you're an XX chromosome. I'm just telling you. So for me, you know, the authenticity has always been, the two leaders are, I need to be the smartest, and I need to make sure everybody around, I surround myself with people that I know will fear me, feel inferior, say yes to everything I want to say, never challenge me, because that makes me feel the best, and that's what I need to be surrounded with. I'm always the one, and I say it in meetings, I'm the slowest gazelle. If you feel me catching up to you, heaven forbid passing you, you need to be very scared, because I might need to find a faster gazelle. And I think, so the two ways of looking at that part of my life afforded me the opportunity to be authentic and say, hey, everybody, all you other smarty pants in here might understand this, but I don't. Somebody help explain it to me. I think, to me, it's been communication, in understanding people, in seeing potential in people, and then positioning them as best they can. I have always found that leadership quality, the smarter my people were, the more credit I gave them, the more the momentum developed. And quite frankly, as that tide would rise, so did my boat. And then I've seen other people just want to, you know, intentionally stifle it so that they could stand out on their own. And you in life will meet those folks, and you'll see exactly what I'm saying. And not one gender or not one set of DNA owns the difference. There's plenty of examples of all of it.
Great. Jan?
Well, Cindy and I are very similar styles, so she said it very well.
Yeah, so ego has to take a back
Yeah.
seat.
Doesn't matter whose
It
ego,
doesn't-
like too much of
Surround
it is not
yourself
good.
with good, quality, talented people.
That want to do well
Yes.
together.
Yeah.
Right, and if one of those smarter people is also ego driven, then you need to say, you're not
You
part of the
can
team.
disrupt, yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
So we're a couple minutes from 12:30 and I want to respect everyone's time. So we're gonna go ahead and close the meeting. But if you have any other questions that you wanted to submit, perhaps we could have those questions answered afterwards. Unless, do we have a couple minutes to maybe take one or?
We have a couple minutes, there's none in the chat right
Okay. All right, so on behalf of the Jane Addams Circle and Rockford University, we want to thank you for your time and
Thank you.
sharing your personal stories and the opportunity to learn about leadership, authenticity, and how to show up every day. And we'll follow up with a survey later this week so that you can let us know what you liked about this session, what you'd like to hear about in the future, topics or questions. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Thank you, great job.
Do we have any questions?
Questions currently, but Donovan says outstanding meetings. How are you?
Go are you? I like
I
that.
actually have a question.
Yeah.
It sounds as though both of you are very, very deliberate about, that's the word that keeps coming to me, very deliberate about how you plan out your day, what you do, what you think about and things like that. And I think, especially if we're talking perhaps to younger people, can you just talk a little bit about how you approach your day or your month or your quarter?
Sure.
Because I think that's really interesting. I myself is more of a willy-nilly person, you know, and think about, well, how can I approach this more systematically or more deliberately? How can I get more done? How can I accomplish more by really thinking about it?
Very quickly for me, I think life is an evolution. And I think the goal is to take good things that you get exposed to and start to work on them and make yourself better. I wasn't always, everything wasn't as organized for me. Some people wake up and they're very, I know, kids in my family, nieces and nephews that can tell you to a second, they're very focused. They know exactly what they're doing. I wasn't that person. But I think to me, every day that you look at it and you think, okay, this didn't go well, or I didn't get that done. Why didn't I? And assess it. And then if you make tomorrow where you're just one little bit better, I use my mom and my dad as an example. My mom was she would do 60 things. At the end of the day, they would all get done. But if you walked into the house at any given point in time, you would think that just a tornado was just going on in there. Now, my dad, he would start here and do something, then he would start there and do something, completely clean up. And at the end of the day, if somebody came in, the house was great. But depending on where you were, they got to the same place, they just got there differently. And I think you have to look at at the end of the day, are you getting to the same result as, did you have to put in more effort than someone else who did it a better way? Did it require more effort and energy? And if it didn't, then okay, then you're good. Organize and continue the way you're doing it. However, if someone has systematically figured out the best hack and you're just completely ignoring the hack and not learning a best practice from someone else, well, then shame on you. So I would like to say that before people put on YouTube or anything else, hack videos to help you, put the peanut butter on a Ritz cracker in a faster fashion than someone else could. I've picked up plenty of those things to make my life better, but it's because I was open to the fact that I want to know a best practice and it looks like something that would work for me. So I think, how do you do it? It's, you have your way, constantly look left and right, constantly open yourselves up to friends and coworkers, and then you pick a snippet of that seems to work a little bit better. I like that idea. It worked well for them. I think I can institute it into my way of doing things. And I think my life is an amalgamation of, if you would have seen me 30 plus years ago, versus where I am now, it's just been a growth and a journey of, I like that, that's what I'm gonna do too.
Do we have any other questions?
No additional questions, just a lot of thank yous and, appreciation.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Thanks much.
I hope that's what you were looking for out of this session, so.
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah.
Thanks much, everybody.
Very well done.
We go for an hour.